I want to give my early thoughts and analysis on another week one matchup. We have Florida State taking on LSU. LSU currently at the moment is a 3.5-point favorite going into this matchup. And let me ask you guys a question to start off. Which head coach do you think needs to win this game more? Brian Kelly is kicking off the start of his tenure as the head coach of LSU football. He has had a lot of success previously with Notre Dame. He took them to a BCS national championship. They also have appeared in the college football playoffs a couple of times under Brian Kelly. And Brian Kelly, over the course of this offseason, has pretty much came out and said that, listen, we have no interest in trying to rebuild and retool. We're trying to win right away. And it's been pretty evident with how aggressive LSU has been in the transfer portal. Then you have Mike Norvell, who is entering year 3 in his tenure with Florida State. And he has pretty much taken the slow and steady approach. And I think for Mike Norvell, I feel he needs to win this game a little bit more than what Brian Kelly does. And for several reasons. The first one being that LSU is pretty talented on paper. Okay, LSU should at least be able to win no less than 6 games. However, you look at Florida State, and you look at their roster on paper, doesn't really look all that great. You still have concerns about how good the offensive line is going to be, where's the pass rush going to come from with the loss of Jermaine Johnson, how's the secondary going to perform. So on paper, you don't really know how to properly judge Florida State. And another thing is that you look at Florida State's schedule, outside of their week 0 matchup against Duquesne, there's not really another game after that you can say, okay, JT, like I have full confidence that FSU is going to be able to win this matchup. And pretty much when you go through the whole entire FSU schedule, every game pretty much is a toss-up. It can go either way. So for Mike Norvell, a win here would be huge because we're going off the assumption that FSU handles business against Duquesne and they don't have another Jacksonville State nightmare. And if they're able to win this game, they go into their bye week before they enter conference play. And then after that, they go on the road and face Louisville. So if you can get off to a 2-0 start, I think that would be huge for FSU moving forward for this season. Because this is a program that right now, they need some juice. They need something to be excited about. And what would be a better way to start off the season than upsetting LSU? Because although odds makers right now have LSU as a 3.5-point favorite, ESPN thinks that LSU has a 71% chance of winning this game. And the majority of people that I have talked to feel that LSU is going to win this game and they're going to win it convincingly. But for LSU, I do have a couple of questions, okay? We don't know who's going to be starting at quarterback. Now, according to multiple reports out there, many people believe that Gunnar Nussmeier is in the driver's seat. Now, Gunnar Nussmeier has appeared in a few games for LSU, and he has had a really good spring. He's been raved about from coaches, teammates, so many people believe that he's going to end up getting the nod for being the starter at quarterback in this game. And if he does, he has a really good group of wide receivers that he's going to be throwing to. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But for FSU, their offensive line struggled last season. How improved is their O-line going to be in this game? And you can say the same for LSU. Now, the difference between LSU's offensive line and Florida State's offensive line is that I think it's fair to say that LSU has way more talent on the offensive line compared to Florida State. They have hit the transfer portal really hard. They have a lot of talented guys in that offensive line room, and it's really about them trying to find the right combination. So in this game, are they going to start off with the right group of starters, or are they still going to have to continue to make some adjustments on the fly as we progress throughout the season to try to find the best offensive line combination possible? Meanwhile, you look at FSU, And if you were to ask me, JT, which team do you think has the more favorable matchup on the offensive line? I think it has to be LSU, because FSU's offensive line is going to be tested in a big way in this game. Because LSU has some dogs on that defensive line. You got Mason Smith, Ali Gay, BJ Ojulari. So for LSU, on the other hand, you're facing a Florida State team that doesn't really know who their number one pass rusher is going to be. And if you're a Seminoles fan, you don't even know really how great the pass rush is going to be this year, because your two leading pass rushers from last season are gone. Jermaine Johnson, he's with the New York Jets. Keir Thomas, he's gone as well. So you're hoping that Derek McClendon can end up having a breakout year. This is somebody who had 3.5 sacks last year. But outside of him, you don't really know where your pass rush is going to come from. So I think that LSU has a more favorable matchup when you look at their offensive line going against the FSU defensive line. Meanwhile, LSU's offensive line, we're going to find just how good they are right away in this game, because LSU's defensive line is a little bit underrated. And one of the most important aspects of this matchup, when you're talking about what Florida State has to do to pull off the upset, how efficient is Jordan Travis and the Florida State passing attack going to be in this game? For Jordan Travis, this is somebody who is a phenomenal athlete. We know what he can do when he decides to tuck the football and run. However, his accuracy has been a hindrance. And you're wondering just how much has he improved over the course of this offseason in that department. Because I believe that FSU can get to 8-9 wins this season if Jordan Travis takes that next step as a passer. Could we see that next step be shown in this game? Because the wide receiver position for Florida State, it really concerns me. And I do think that it is a pretty big mismatch, at least when you look at the talent that they have on paper compared to the talent that LSU has on paper when you look at their cornerbacks. Because I love LSU's cornerbacks. You have Mekhi Gardner, who is a transfer from the University of Louisiana. You have Jarek Bernard-Converse, awesome name, by the way, transfer from Oklahoma State. He was pretty good last year. And you got Greg Brooks Jr., just to name a couple of key cornerbacks that I'm going to be having my eyes on in this matchup, who potentially could be significant contributors for LSU this season. And you look at FSU's wide receiver room, who's going to be that guy who really emerges as the number one option in this passing attack? Because anytime you're trying to pull off an upset against a team that you perceive to have more talent than you, especially when you look at the defensive side of things, you got to have a wide receiver who you can look at in third down situations and say, okay, I trust him. Do you have a security blanket? Because if you do, that's also going to help Jordan Travis take that next step as a passer. And you look at Malik McLean, Michael Pittman, transfer from Oregon, the little brother of Michael Pittman, wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. You have Ja'Kai Douglas, Keyshawn Helton, Johnny Wilson, and Ontario Wilson. But who really do you have confidence in as a FSU fan do you think could be that reliable option, that security blanket for Jordan Travis in this matchup? Because they're going to need to have one, because this pass rush is going to be really good. And if this offensive line still is what it has been for over the last couple of years, then you're going to have to be able to make sure that you can get the ball out fast. And these wide receivers are going to have to be able to create that separation. But one thing that I think that FSU does has going for them, when you look at the passing matchup in this game, it's the fact that for LSU, they just got a bunch of guys from the transfer portal, right? And they're just kind of just throwing them in there, and they're just going to go with whoever ends up performing the best. And you're wondering, how good is the communication going to be? And that's always a big factor when you're looking at a head coach that's going into their first game with a new team. For Brian Kelly, how well prepared is he going to have this team? And I'm not questioning the fact that this team is going to come out, flat or anything like that. But I'm wondering just, Is the communication going to be there? Is the chemistry going to be there? Because just because you get a lot of talented guys from the transfer portal and you have a lot of talent on your team doesn't mean it's going to mesh well right away. Because when you're judging how good a secondary is, the majority of times, teams that have good secondaries not only just have the talent, but they also communicate very well in the back end. And I'm wondering if LSU is going to have some communication problems that maybe allows Florida State to have a couple of big plays in the passing game due to miscommunication and blown coverage assignments. And then for Florida State, is their offense going to be better converting in third down situations compared to last season? Because they had one of the worst third down offenses in America last year. And the reason for that was because the lackluster offensive line and the inefficiency as a passer that Jordan Travis has shown. And that's why it's so important that Jordan Travis takes that next step, because if he improves as a passer, then the third down offense is going to improve as well in that department. Now, we have an extremely huge mismatch when it comes to the LSU wide receiver room versus the FSU secondary. And when I say huge mismatch, that may just be an understatement, because we know that nobody is going to slow down Keyshawn Boutte. He's one of the best wide receivers in college football. Now, outside of Amarion Cooper and Jamie Robinson, who else in this FSU secondary do you trust to handle up in this game? Okay, I think that Amarion Cooper is going to be in for a breakout season. I think that he could end up being one of the best cornerbacks in the Atlantic Coast Conference. However, I don't really trust Florida State secondary in this game, because first of all, I don't know how good the pass rush is going to be. Second of all, if you have a pass rush that isn't great, it puts your cornerbacks in a more difficult situation, because now they really have to be shut down. Because if you have that pass rush there, your cornerbacks don't have to be in coverage for all that long. So for FSU, this secondary is going to get tested in a big way. And really, I think your only hope as a Seminole fan is that maybe you can slow down Keyshawn Boutte due to the fact that, maybe whoever ends up getting the nod at quarterback for LSU may end up coming out flat. Maybe Brian Kelly and his staff make the wrong decision when it comes to the starting quarterback. Maybe they have to make a change during halftime at quarterback. But if, let's say, Gunnar Nussmeier gets a start and he comes out guns blazing on fire, then what's next? What's going to be the game plan on defense? So I'm really concerned about the FSU secondary in this game. Yes, they probably going to have some talented guys there, but do they have anybody capable of being able to slow down this wide receiver core that LSU has? Because the only way I see this wide receiving core being slowed down is if the quarterback position ends up coming out flat. But if it ends up coming out on fire, I think that this secondary could be in for a very long night. However, if you're a Seminoles fan, you're saying, okay, JT, what's our strengths on defense? Well, your run defense should be really good this year. LSU coaches have been really excited about the linebacker position. Many of them have said that they feel that this is the best linebacker play that they are going to be receiving this year. In years, you have a lot of depth, a lot of talent in that linebacker room. You have Tatum Bethune, transferred from UCF, Kalen DeLoach, DJ Lundy, Amari Gaynor. This is a very talented group that has a lot of depth. And your defensive line, you have Robert Cooper, Fabian Lovett, who are really good or should be pretty good against the run. So the run defense should be pretty good. So if you can limit how effective the LSU run game is, and you can put them in obvious passing situations, then that increases how much success you can have on defense. Because if LSU is in obvious passing situations and you get them into third and long, then that should increase your chances of being able to get your defense off the field. It's also worth noting that FSU last season was really good at forcing turnovers. They averaged 2.3 turnovers per game in their last 3 matchups. They were 21st in America last season in forced turnovers. So that's another thing that you're going to have on your side. That if you can keep up that same production when it comes to the forced turnover department, that's going to be another thing that's going to be on your side. And listen, I really think that Jordan Travis is really going to have his breakout year this year. And that's why I think that this game is going to be a lot closer than what a lot of people think. And honestly, even though LSU is the more talented team on paper, I kind of still lean FSU, surprisingly. Because I really do have confidence that Jordan Travis is going to have this thing figured out. And I really think that he will take that next step as a passer. And when he does, this LSU defense, even though it is really good, I think when you have a quarterback who is just so dynamic with running the football, such as Jordan Travis, I think it really poses really difficult to slow him down. And then on top of that, you got to look at the fact that this is a brand new coaching staff. LSU fans, of course, are going to say, listen, JT, Brian Kelly has been around the game for a while. He's one of the best coaches in college football. Things are going to click right away. Are you sure that things are going to click right away? Because, of course, if you're an LSU fan, you're going to be overly optimistic, or you're going to have the optimistic approach, and you're going to say, yes, JT, like, things are going to work out for us. Brian Kelly's going to have these guys prepared. We're not going to have no issues. But this is week 1, okay? Issues are always going to arise. The best chance for an upset is the first game of the season, because you haven't really been playing against nobody but yourself. So we don't really know just how well oiled this LSU team is going to be. Are they going to come out fully well organized? Are they going to have great chemistry, great communication? Those are always the things that you have to look at when you have a brand new coaching staff. And another thing that FSU has in their favor is that you have a tune-up game before this. You get to play Duquesne, so you get to work out all of the lumps and kinks that you had before you go into this matchup. So you go into this matchup already a little bit more prepared than LSU, simply for the fact that you had some in-game action. You got to see what your weaknesses were. Hopefully you can get them addressed and maybe improve them slightly before this matchup. So even though I still think that LSU wins this game, I still think that I'm a little bit on the fence on it. You feel me? Because if LSU comes out and they end up not really having no communication problems, and the fact that they have a new coaching staff that's able to have them prepared for this game, I think that LSU should win this game pretty handily, at least by 10 points. However, if this coaching staff and this team aren't really gelling right away, I think it's going to allow FSU the chance at pulling off the upset. So let me know who you guys have winning this game. Do you guys think that FSU can pull off the upset? Is LSU going to come into this game and just blow Florida State out of the water? Because that's been what the popular narrative has been when I've talked to people about this game. They either think that FSU is going to win this game in a tightly contested matchup, or LSU is going to win this game convincingly and it's not really going to be close. So let me know your thoughts on this game down in the comment section down below. And I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. Remember that the JT Sports Podcast is available on all podcasting platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Wherever you get your podcasts from, the JT Sports Podcast is available.